Hello everybody, welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me. Whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, I appreciate you watching. And today we're going to talk about color theory. We're going to talk about digital color in all of its many forms. We're going to kind of run through a lot of it since many of you have already had a lot of this. Just look at the idea of color theory and look at how we can kind of approach color theory from the online world in several different perspectives. And then we will take just some time, and I just want to build a website today. So I'm basically going to kind of complete the website for Color Lab, maybe a bit of a truncated version of the website for Color Lab. Maybe I won't fill everything out completely for you all, but just to kind of give you an indication of some expectations or some different things there, just to give you an idea, or really, more just to give you some ideas than anything else, right? As you're approaching working on that lab for this module. So in general, when we're working with digital color, we're working off of the RGB color model, right? And this is the additive color space. So when we're thinking about color model, we can define a color model as a group of colors that are identified in a way that computers can understand, or at least in terms of digital color. That's what we mean when we're talking about a color model. Colors that can be identified in a way that computers can understand. And when we're talking about primary colors, we're talking about primary colors as basic colors that cannot be created by mixing other colors together. So when we think about like our time in elementary school, and we go back to, when we were really, really young, when we go back to kindergarten, first grade, when we were first kind of learning our colors and kind of what colors we could mix together to make other colors, we learned about our primary colors. And we learned our primary colors were three colors. We learned they were red, blue, and yellow. Right? And we said we have red, blue, and yellow, and then we can take our red, blue, and yellow, and we can mix blue and yellow to make green, and we can mix red and blue to make purple, and we can mix, which ones did I not say? Red and yellow to make orange. Right? And that is true when we're talking about paints and dyes and physical media. But it's no longer true when we're dealing with the digital space, when we're dealing with light. When we're dealing with light, our primary colors are red, green, and blue, RGB. So instead of yellow, we replace yellow with green. And when we mix red light and green light in full intensity, at the exact same, in the exact same intensities, at full intensity, red light and green light mixed together gives us yellow. Green light and blue light mixed together at full intensities gives us cyan. And red light and blue light mixed together at full intensities gives us magenta. Right? And we get all of our varying colors, over 17 million colors in that we can make up in the visible light color spectrum with varying intensities in between, right? We can kind of think about the way that we kind of build our colors based on a flashlight that can have varying intensities. And the way that we kind of shine these flashlights in varying intensities allows us to mix these colors together. So in digital color, our primary colors are red, green, and blue, are R, G, and B. And when we take two of these flashlights and we mix them together, when we take two of these colors and we mix them together, we get secondary colors. Now here we see a little example here on our screen, in the lower part of our screen here, that is an example of these colors mixing together. Right, we see, our red flashlight, our green flashlight, and our blue flashlight. And we see the areas where they overlap. And they're mixing. And if you've ever been into like a theater, as well, and you've kind of looked up and you looked at the spotlights over the stage, you see that they have gels on them. They're called gels, right? They're just like they're not exactly plastic. They're a plastic-like material. Because regular plastic would melt, right? But they have these gels over top of them that are red, green, and blue, so that way they could change the lights of the lighting that's on stage by mixing the varying intensities of the lights. So if you want everything on the stage to be full white light, you just take all of your sliders, you push them all the way up. All the lights mix in full intensity all together, and you get pure white light, which is what we see in the middle of our example here. And if we want some other color, right, we just kind of adjust our sliders, right? If you've ever seen like an audio mixing board, there is a very similar looking board for lights in a theater as well, right? There are sliders where we can control the different intensities for different lights, so we can mix the colors and all these kind of things. It's very interesting. But we call this additive color mixing when we are using digital color, or in the digital color space. It is additive color mixing. With our physical color space, our red, yellow, and blue primary colors that we learned about in elementary school, this is the subtractive color mixing space. But our RGB color model for digital color is the additive color mixing space, where we are producing a whole range of 17 million plus different colors based on the values that we can see in light, based on R, G, and B, red, green, and blue. And like if you go back and it used to be like really evident, like if you got a little water droplet on a screen, and it would really magnify the pixels that were on the screen, and you could see the little red, green, and blue pixels that were on a screen displaying the image to you. Some of you might remember doing that at some point. Now most of us are used to a red, green, and blue triplet, right? And the triplet is the combination of the numbers of light intensity for red, green, and blue values in a certain color, right? So, we've seen like a color picker like this, where we have a red value, a green value, and a blue value, right? In previous classes, one of the things that we've done here is we have taken values like this, and we've converted them to hexadecimal, so we could get hexadecimal color, right? So if we were to look at this in terms of hexadecimal, many of you may have seen it. It's, we have colors in our websites that start with a hashtag that indicates that they are a hexadecimal based color. And that means that they are in the hexadecimal based we represent that color in the hexadecimal based system. And so oftentimes we'd see something like 9A 36 B7, right? Something like that. And what this actually is it's three sets of numbers. 1, 2, 3 that represent our RGB values, R, G, B. Just in hexadecimal, we can use 2 characters for each pair to represent a number that goes between 0 and 255. And that gives us 256 digits per pair that we can represent with 2 characters per pair. Right? So that means that the number of colors that we can represent here with 6 characters is 256 cubed characters. Right, and if you do the math on that, right, that's 256 times 256 times 256, which is 16,777,216. Thereabouts, right? So we can represent that many characters. Now we use hexadecimal because normally we use decimal. Decimal is our standard numbering system. One of the tricks that we don't realize when we're talking about decimal is, decimal is a base 10 numbering system, which means we have 10 numbers in our numbering system. These numbers are 0 through 9. Which means the number 10 doesn't exist. The number 11 doesn't exist. The number 12 doesn't exist. That's not a number. That's not a real number. It's a 1 and a 0. It's a 1 and a 1. It's a 1 and a 2. It's these same numbers. We just put them in different places. Right? So in hexadecimal, we want to be able to represent a value that's higher than 9, but we don't have a number that will do it. So we start using letters. So we would go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A, B, C, D, E, F. To get us there. Right? And that would be like counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A, B, C, D, E, F would be like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Right? And so that gets us our hexadecimal. Hexa meaning 6. Decimal being 10. 6 plus 10, 16. Right? 16 numbers in our system. So we have 1 through 15, which is 15 numbers. And then 0, which makes the 16th there. So let's look at this number that we have. Let's look at this color that we have here. Red 155, green 109, blue 214. And let's convert that to hexadecimal really quickly. Right, so that would be our red value here is 155. Our green value is 109. And our blue value is 214. And, digital color is always one of the things that I say that I could teach, entire classes just about digital color. Like we can do entire 14, 16-week online classes just about color. I find color to be that interesting. And I know you all probably don't, even though I do. Right, but let's take these 3 values, and these are the intensity values of our different flashlights for our color here, right? So in our red here, it's 155. So what we would do is in our hexadecimal, we have a pair of characters here. We have 2 places. In everything that we do, we kind of number them by the base number, which hexadecimal was 16, and then their number placed to the exponent. So it's 16 to the 0 for the first place, and 16 to the 1 for the second place, which is fine, right? Like in most cases, like when we do binary, right, this is kind of hard because it's like 2 to the 0 is 1 because Everything raised to the power of 0 is always 1. So, that's all well and good. But then 2 to the 1 is 2, 2 squared is 4, 2 to the 3rd is 8, 2 to the 4th is 16, 2 to the 5th is 32, so on and so forth. But in this case, all we have to worry about is 1, and anything raised to the power of 1 is itself, so it's 16. So the first thing that we need to do here is take 155 and divide it by 16. So 155 divided by 16 is 9.6875. So it's the whole number we get there is 9. So we can put a 9 there. Because 16 goes evenly into 155 9 times. Now that does leave us a remainder. And that remainder is 11, right? Because we can just say, okay, well, 9 times 16 is 144. And I have a calculator here, so that's how this is working out. And so we have 11. Well, we said with hexadecimal, we start, 9, then 10 is A, 11 is B. So 155 would be 9B. So we can do the same thing for 109 here. And we can say 109 divided by 16. Okay, well that's 6. So our first number is going to be 6 here. 6 times 16 equals 96. So 109 minus 96 is 13, right? So if A is 10, B is 11, C is 12, D is 13. So our other number here would be D. So that's 9B, 6D. And finally, we have 214 here on the end. 214 divided by 16 equals 13.375. So the first number is 13. A is 10, B is 11, C is 12, D is 13. So we have D. 13 times 16 is 208. 244 minus 208 is 36. Which that's not. 214 minus 208 is 6. Just 6, not 36. So we can just put 6 here. So 9B, 6D, D6. And that's our hexadecimal number. Got a little ahead of myself there. And so we can know that's true, right? Because we can see the color here that we get based off of that. And if I Google that hexadecimal number, which I'll do that in another window here, hashtag 9B, 6D, D6. What's odd is it normally gives me the color, but it's telling me that this is FCBA03. So let me just try to copy this and put this in here. Because it's not giving me the right value here. Because you see there, it clearly says, maybe if we click images here, it'll show us the image. There it is. Or one that's close to it. That is weird. Google's usually on its bow. Google's usually on the ball there. With the color picker, when I Google the color picker, Google's got something weird going on today. Strange indeed. Let's try a different one. We're going to use coolers.co a little later. So we can just enter that one into here. Start the generator. We're going to enter in 9B, 6D, D6, and we get our medium purple, which we see is there's some image compression issues there, but we can see it's the same color, right? So that's how we convert those numbers that we would get in red, green, blue values here to hexadecimal values, and that's also how we would convert them back as well. All right, we would just do that same process, just in reverse. Right, and we'll come back to using coolers here in just a few minutes when we get ready to build a site. I'm actually going to, when we get to... I want to talk about Hsl here, because when we get to my demo, I'm going to use Hsl. Because Hsl is really sort of a more modern way that we use color in CSS, because it kind of helps us work with our color theory a little bit easier, right? Because when we talk about analogous, or we talk about complementary, or something like that, we can more easily determine these colors. Right, so when we are looking at Hsl, we have an Hsl color wheel, which we will see on the next slide. We have 3 values that we get. 1 hue value and 2 percentage values. Hsl stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. So instead of trying to guess based on intensity, if we want a color to be lighter or brighter, we can adjust the saturation and lightness numbers and make them higher. All right, so it's a whole lot easier with Hsl here to get an accurate color just by guessing. All right, so based on what we have here, 270. 270 is kind of in that purple range. And actually, I think it's pretty close to that same purple that we were just using. That might even be the same color that we were just using. In fact, we can bring back coolers here and find out. I can switch to Hsl. My hue value is 270. My saturation value is 75. My luminance value is 80. So it's not quite the same. It's a little lighter, but it's pretty close. If I wanted to get dead on, I would just have to basically take my luminance value and move it down a little bit, move my saturation value down a little bit. Yeah, we are not very far off here from these two colors. It is practically the same. But that's cool. Pretty close, right? We can still, so, but determining Hsl is a little bit different because we have to use our Hsl Color Wheel to kind of understand where our Hsl colors are. Red is at 0. Red also is at 360 because a circle is 360 degrees. And then every 60 degrees, I change colors, right? So 0 to 60. 60 is yellow. 120 is green. 180 is cyan. 240 is blue. 300 is magenta. And then back around to red. So if I wanted an orange, I would do 30 degrees. And if I wanted some kind of yellow, green, green, yellow, I would go, in between yellow and green, which would be, around 100 degrees, 80 degrees, 90 degrees, right? In that area. And so if I wanted, say, a complementary color, I could say, well, if I have a green, put it in, say, the 200 range, which I'm going to use a green, then my complement is going to be directly across the color wheel. So if I have a green that's like 100 and, let's say, 36, all I would have to do is add 180 to that number because a semicircle is 180 degrees. And that would put me on the opposite side of the color wheel from the color that I picked. And that would get you to a complementary color. And so typically what I do when I'm starting out a project is I will first start out, and I am kind of moving into starting out my project here, and I may very well, kind of come back to this slide presentation, time permitting, just to look at some of the color theories as we're kind of going along. Or the color schemes. But I sit down and I start sketching out a project. I just kind of made a little thumbnail sketch here. In general, once you have a little bit of this under your belt and you can do it quick enough, one of the things that I do in general, I call it rapid prototyping, which is when you can work fast enough, making a bunch of thumbnails and wireframes and sketches almost takes you more time than it would to just actually sit down and write code, right? When you're just getting started, like many of you are, just, sitting down and making drawings and kind of figuring things out and being deliberate is a good idea. But, the more experience you get and the more sites you get under your belt, and then the more beneficial rapid prototyping becomes. So I just kind of sat down and I just drew a quick thumbnail of just some ideas that I kind of wanted. And I'm ready to write some code. So I just went ahead and made a quick project directory here with just a couple simple files. I'm going to go from scratch as much as possible here. Right, all I have currently is just a skeleton with a title and a link to my style sheet and an empty style sheet. I do want to start out by going to Coolers and picking a color scheme, right? And I love coolers.co for picking out colors. It's one of my favorite sites. There's a lot of things that we can do with it. So if I wanted to make a, say, complementary color scheme with a couple of analogous colors that would, or monochromatic colors, I should say, rather. If I wanted to make a let me get this out. If I wanted to have a mostly monochromatic color scheme with a complementary accent, I might go into Coolers and do this. So we're thinking about this in terms of our website for color project, right? Where I've asked you to kind of take your favorite color and make a website based around that with some specific requirements. And so in general, I kind of waffle between blue and green. And today, you know, I'm feeling green, right? So I'm going to come here and I'm going to select a green. And so I'm going to use a color picker and I'm going to select a green here. And I can just kind of select a green that I like. Maybe give it more saturation, give it some more luminance. Right, we see these Hsl values here. We see these Hsl values here, and we're going to use these, right, later on. These are the same values we would use for Hsl Color. So we can just plug them directly in. The number that we have here is our hexadecimal value, so we can plug that in as well. What I can do here is I can copy this. And I can actually go through and I can I think I can only do it with the picker. So let me change this to the picker, copy this value, and I'm just going to change this value and I'm going to make it the same color for these. Actually, I'm going to make it the same color across the board. Right, and so now I can kind of take these, use my Hsl picker. So I'm just going to click on this, click on the little drop down here at the bottom, change it to Hsl, adjust my luminance a little bit. If it's too like in your face like that color is, I'm going to take and I'm going to just adjust my saturation down until we find something that's reasonable, that we like. And so typically when I'm making a color palette, I'm wanting to get enough colors that I can have a color for the things that I need colors for, but not so many colors to where, you know, it's wild and all over the place. So I might pick 2 or 3 that are in a certain, you know, in a particular color scheme, and then maybe 1 accent. Right, so I might want one that's maybe even darker than this. And then just for fun, we'll throw white in the end over here. And then I might want this one to be my accent color, my pop of color. And so I might want it to be my complementary color, my opposite here. So we can see my hue value here is 180. Or it's not 180, it's 115. I'm getting ahead of myself. If I want to go to the opposite of my color wheel here, I can add 180 to that, which is going to give me 295. So I can change this value here to 295. That will give me the opposite color. And I'm not going to use that color much. I'm just going to use that as a bit of an accent color, just as a bit of a pop of color. Right, and you'll notice in the colors that I chose here, I didn't choose anything too bright, right? Like I chose everything very subdued, very kind of laid back. You know, in general, that's the vibe that I'm kind of going for. We'd kind of say that, you know, this would be more of a, you know, nature or a natural type of look. Right, so we can start building from here. I'm going to move this off to another window, and we'll just start building a site. So I'm going to start out with just some standard, like we'll use a header, we'll use some header tags, and I've changed my I've changed my VS Code theme here, so you'll all have to tell me how difficult or easy it is to read. I'm going to use a div here for a grid, and I'm going to put a section here for a sidebar. I don't really know what I'm going to do with that. It's empty on my sketch here. I just want something there, right? And I'm going to have my main here, and I want a footer down here at the bottom, and in my main I'm going to put a few articles. Right, just so we can have some stuff in there. Right, just a little bit of structure. And so right now what we're just trying to do is we're trying to separate the content from the layout and structure, which is going to be something that we can kind of do here. In my head here, I'm going to put an H1. I'm going to give it an ID of title. And I'm going to say, well, it's not easy being green. Something like that, right? And since I am going to send this project to GitHub so I can send it to you all, let me just go ahead and get init and get add period and get commit just some good best practices here along the way. So let's fire up our live server. It'll probably open up on my side window here. I'll try to bring it over, and I'll try to have them kind of I'm going to try to do this number today, even though that's not really the way I would normally work, because come on. Do the thing. I wouldn't normally work this way, but because I have multiple monitors, but if I didn't have multiple monitors, this might be a good way to do it. So let's just hop into our style.css and start writing some CSS. All right. And actually, I'll just stay zoomed out, at least for the time being, because I'll need to grab this color from over here. So we're going to go ahead and start with our reset code. Box sizing, border box, margin 0, padding 0, font family, sans serif. Just like that. So for our header, we will, see it's already full width, so let's min height. Let's give it a 15 viewport height, min height. And give it a background color of, let's use our Hsl color, which goes Hsl, parentheses, 115, 71%, 24%. 115, comma, 74%. comma, oh, it's 71%, comma, 24%. And we will save to get it to show up. We'll go ahead and go, let's focus our hashtag title. Color will be white. And font, let's see, let's text, align center, text, let's try a little text transform, capitalize, to have it all uppercase, and font size 5VH. If we wanted to center this vertically, we could use our, we could actually make this a grid. I like to use the grid technique to display this vertically. So we can display grid here. And then, let's see here. What is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? Or it's align content center. Yes, align content center. Centers it up nice, nicey nice like. So if we just have one thing in a div like that, we can just align it up just like that. And so we can make that real big for a second. Shrink it back down for a minute. Make it real small for a second. Just so we can see it be responsive. Now, I used VH there instead of VW, right? So maybe I want it to be Vmax. That might be the smarter thing. So then when it gets bigger, it'll get bigger accordingly. There we go. I like that. That's kind of cool. All right. So from there, I had my div that I wanted to make my grid. All right. Well, you know what? Actually, I think I might want to go ahead and put my accent color in this, my complementary accent color in this, which is my purple color here. So I can do this with a border bottom on my header. And I can just put like a thick bottom on the bottom of that, maybe 15px, solid, and use that purple color from the palette that we built earlier. Right, so something like, let's see, that's going to be Hsl 294, comma, 71%, comma, 24%. And there's that border. Now, one thing to notice here is that there isn't really any contrast here between these two greens. There's only a visual contrast insofar as the color is a complement. There is no actual color contrast in terms of luminance because they're the exact same luminance value. But you know, it's got that whole Joker or Riddler aesthetic. You know, the whole Batman villain aesthetic. So I'm cool with that. I like that a lot. So I think we can move on from here. I think we can go ahead and you know, address some of the other stuff we were going to address here. get us to kind of a good place of where we wanted to go. I think I want to do that lighter green that we have here. I think I'll do that as the sidebar. Or I might do that as the background color. Yeah, I think I want to do that as the background color to my main there. So before I do that, let me set up my grid here. Or actually, before I do any of that, let me stage another commit here. So let's get add period, get commit -m, finished header. And now I can focus on this grid. So that's hashtag grid for our ID of grid. We're going to display that as a grid, template, columns. It's going to be like, I want it to kind of be off a little bit. I want to have one column that's way wider than the other. So I'm going to say like maybe 1 frame and then 4 frames. So 1 frame, 4 frames. For our sidebar and our main, I want to give them both the same height. So it might have been a better idea to use a flex box here, but we're rolling, so we'll keep going. So our sidebar here is hashtag side. Our main is main. We'll give them a min height of maybe 60 viewport height. Maybe 70 viewport height. Our side will give a background color of the dark green, so that will be background color of Hsl. Our dark green here was, I'm also going to use that on the footer, so that's 115, 88, 13. So that's 115, comma, 88%, comma, 13%. So there's that sidebar there. Our main, I want to give it a background color of the lighter green, which is going to be Hsl 115, because they're all the same color. We're just shifting their saturation and luminance. 37%. 52%. Right? So monochromatic color scheme. Now that's a lot of green. Right, one of the things I might want to do here is break this up with the articles, which was kind of the intention. Right, or I might not want to have this main block be green at all. Although again, my intention, my thought as I was building this was to take the articles, make them, say, 80% of their parent container, give them a min height of, let's see, how many of these did I put in here? 3. Yeah, so if I made that 70, we'll say 20 viewport height. And give them a background color of white. And give them a margin 0, or margin, like 3VH auto. Right, so we can... Oh, and I just put articles in there instead of just article. So let me go back. That's what happens when you're saying one thing and you're writing another. Right, and so these would be the places where, you know, if I had my full screen site here, you know, these would be the places where, you know, if I was filling out the assignment, I would put my text in there, right? You know, this is, you know, we're still getting very much, you know, the more I look at it, the more I really don't like it, the more I'd really want to change and take that green out of the main sidebar here. Maybe I'd put it in the smaller sidebar. Maybe I'd take it out of it altogether. You know, it really, it's giving that Batman villain or what's the Pixar movie with the emotions? Why am I blanking on that right now? It's really giving those vibes, right? But either way, like these are the articles are where you'd put, you know, your text or whatever you'd want to put in this. So that's why those would be there, and then we'd take our really dark green. It might also be another good place to put like another color, right? Like if I were to really be doing this, it might be a smart place to use a third color, you know, or maybe figure out a tertiary color, right? Like if I'm using coolers to make a tertiary color palette, what I would do is I would take the starting color and then instead of 180, I would be moving 360 around, or not 360, just 60 around the color wheel. So I would be, instead of moving to 15, I would be moving to 175 and getting that sort of color and, you know, seeing that, you know, that looks kind of interesting. You know, that gives me kind of a triadic color palette, right? So I can kind of move from there. Maybe I want to go 60 in the opposite direction, so I could subtract 60, get like a 55 here. Maybe add a little bit of luminance to it. All right, so that becomes an interesting triadic color palette there. Right, but for the sake of where we were, let's try to get back to close to where we were here, which I believe was about right here, just so I can put that back in the footer. So let's just add that color to the footer here. Background color. We want it to be Hsl 115, comma 88%, comma 13%, semicolon. Give it a little height. We need like 15 viewport height and height that we haven't used yet. So we'll just do that. And that's already the same one we used here, so it's the exact same color. So I don't even like that. I might even go darker here. I might pull down this lightness value to like 5. Right, or we might decide to do something completely different. You know, this is another place where we could pull in our complementary color. There's a lot of things we could do here. Like one of the things that we might want to do instead is instead of doing the articles, you know, we just do maybe this part all white, use our complementary color as a H1. Then we have a more complete complementary theme. That's another option for us. Right, or an H2 or what have you. Lots of different things that we could do there. with that. You know, this is just to kind of give you an idea of some stuff that we could do. And I just wanted to show you how we can kind of pull it together relatively quickly in order to do that. So let me just have a quick look, see if there's anything else that I want to talk about, or that I need to talk about in the presentation that I have here. I will send you all this this code. In a GitHub. So, in fact, just let me do that here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a GitHub for it here. Web 210 Fa22 color demo. We'll just go ahead and do that here while we're doing that. Git push origin master, and there we go. So I'll have that to send you with today's recording. So that is all that I have for you for today. Thank you again for watching. If you have any questions as you're watching the recording, please let me know. I'll hang out in the chat for just a couple minutes with the music playing for anyone who is live with me, just in case anyone who's live with me has any questions. But again, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.